So we're going to quickly run a video before we even start. But I'm so excited to be here with Ken, my friend Ken, and watch the work.
When we see headlines about people suffering from toxic chemical exposures,
when we see data indicating there's harm being caused by chemicals, we take action.
People have an image of California, its beautiful beaches and its scenic mountains, but in between, there's a lot of industry.
We are the front line for EWG in California State Capitol. Everywhere we go, we encounter throngs of industry lobbyists. One of the first public hearings I went to when I started working for EWG was one regarding nail products and the toxic chemicals in those products. It was standing room only, guys lined up along the back of the wall, 200 lobbyists, and without us there, public concerns would not be heard.
When you're up against that test, you're up against the best industry has to throw against you.
we have on our side the facts and the truth. But that's not easy to do every day and come in and say, we're right about this. It doesn't work that way. You have to do the roll up your sleeves and do the day-to-day convincing.
They're busy as can be, and year after year, they get legislation passed. Laws that we couldn't dream of passing here in DC.
Successes we've had in Sacramento have included removing BPA from baby bottles.
We've now banned 50 toxic chemicals from cosmetics and the entire class of PFAS forever chemicals. And we are first in the nation to ban 4 toxic food additives.
Who knew that there was a layer of fiberglass in your mattress that may escape into your bedroom? We found out, we found a champion, and now that's law. It will be removed from mattresses forever.
And we're not going to stop there.
It's important to realize that the work we do also affects a lot of Californians who are not well represented in the Capitol. When BPA bottles are no longer desirable in some neighborhoods, they dump them into poor neighborhoods at the dollar stores. When we fight for eliminating toxic pesticides, it doesn't just help the people who may live near it, it mostly helps the farm workers. We can give you dozens and dozens of businesses that's still happening today.
You pass a law in California, as impactful as it is in the economy, you change the entire U.S.
So one example of how our work here ripples across the nation is the work we've done on cosmetics. When we were able to break ground and get those lists of chemicals banned in cosmetics sold in California, then other states started following suit.
Just last year, we were able to ban 4 food additives that should not be in our food. We went to the California legislature, they banned them, and now we're seeing legislatures in other states coming to us and saying, we want to do what happened in California. If we've gotten 25 important environmental bills passed over the past 10 years with 2 people, imagine what we could do with 4 or 6 or 8 or more. We have that vision to build out California in a way that will really blow through a lot of expectations for what we can do to protect the environment based on the gridlock here in Washington. That doesn't have to define our future. California can define our future.
Well, this is what I want to talk about. I'm so excited to be here with you, Ken, and everybody knows that I am so much about this. I have 5 grandchildren. Every single thing there is so relevant for all of us, and it's so personal. So let's just start with Ken. You are a soil scientist. So fast forward to where you are and where EWG are leading the environmental health advocacy on Capitol Hill, boardrooms, clean beauty podcasts. How did you go from soil to what you're doing now?
Yeah, and you know, now soil science is like totally sexy.
It's so sexy.
Where was
So
it when I
sexy.
needed it? I mean, right? Happily married, and it just, anyway, just bad timing. Not a big deal. You know, I started off thinking I should be an environmentalist, not because I wanted to regulate people or pass laws. I was interested in the intellectual process of making connections, which for me is the primary thing that an environmentalist does, is sees these connections. And I even worry a little bit these days that with the emphasis on carbon and climate, we're hearing people being climate activists and I worry just a little bit about losing the environmentalist perspective that
I
looks at
completely
things.
agree with you. I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, I just feel like I love the energy, and I love you know the drive of young people to do that. But I do wonder sometimes that anytime you select one thing and try and maximize your efforts on that, if you're an environmentalist, the hair should stand up on your neck, right? It's like, whoa, you're going fast and big. I was taught that that's something to worry about. So as a soil science, you know, I trained got my master's degree in soil science, and I worked for years primarily at the intersection of agriculture and the environment. And I've been involved in every farm bill since 1977. There are a lot of people here who weren't born in '77, so I'm just, and there's a big fight in Washington now. There's a farm bill before the House and the Senate, and we're in a big fight to hang on to money for climate-smart farming. Those fights have, in various forms, lasted for decades. But early in, so EWG is 31, as you can probably tell, and early on, I hired a guy who knew about pesticides, my co-founder, really, Richard Wiles. And I wasn't really that attuned to toxic chemicals and health at that point. He taught me a lot, as did a lot of other great scientists we subsequently hired. And, you know, I just over time realized that sexy as soil science is, I mean, talk about a room. You can have people in the palm of your hand if you just talk about the universal soil loss equation. Do you have a few minutes? So anyway, but the immediacy of toxic chemicals and health really grabbed me. And our early work was all about children and exposure to pesticides. And we did groundbreaking work there in the early 90s when we got our start. And we grew it out from there. And we were a policy shop at that time, as you well know, Debbie. But when the internet came along, information we were putting out that we thought would inform policymakers, like, these are the fruits and vegetables with the most pesticides. You should shop organic when you can. And then here are some fruits and vegetables that, even though they're grown conventionally, don't have a lot of toxics in them. So we have the Dirty Dozen, the Clean 15. We thought that would have an impact on the pesticide policy debate. Not so much, but people started downloading it. We decided to build out something called Skin Deep. If you've gone to a website and looked at your personal care products, 1,000 people an hour go there now, but at the time we put it out, we thought, well, we'll just show all the toxic chemicals in personal care products. There's no rules about what you can put into personal care products. Put anything you want. We thought, well, lawmakers would say, well, we got to fix that big old gap in the law, that big loophole. That didn't happen, but people started shopping based on our ratings. And so most of today, as I've listened to this conversation, I'm not in Washington anymore, but I can still filibuster. Most of the conversation today was so exciting for me because all of it was, with very few exceptions, extra-governmental energy. The conversation was what civil society can do, what good companies can do, what consumers can do, what NGOs can do. That changes things. If we were having this conversation in 1990, we'd be talking about fixing the Clean Air Act. And that was the last time we fixed the Clean Air Act, by the way. We haven't passed a major environmental law in decades, environmental protection law, because the immune system of industry has kicked in. But all this energy, this extra governmental layer, where it's going faster, as you said earlier today, and it's going deeper, this energy, it's exciting because it's changed the dynamic of environmentalism. It used to be, when I was coming up, I wanted to be Ralph Nader. I wanted laws and regulation put on the books. I want to fight these fuckers. I want to make them obey the rules. I want them to protect all of us in the environment. And we spend our limit on lobbying every year. Trust me, we're still in that fight. What I didn't understand, and I understand now, is environmentalism has changed so that what we're fighting for now is as important as what we're fighting against. Whether it's in energy, food, personal care products, cleaning products, in any realm, there's a whole new segments of the economy out there that we can point to and say, I'm for that. And that's scarier to legacy industries than anything you could do with regulation. And that's why, as we moved along, and I went from, soil science and measuring carbon in plants and all the rest, the enduring lesson that has come out is to energize people, you have to give them a certain kind of hope, an actionable hope. And there's nothing wrong with starting small. Several people said it today. We want people to develop these habits. And when they do that, it catches on. It catches on with companies. Look what's happened with Toyota, right? We were talking backstage just before. I mean, Toyota disrupted an entire debate over fuel economy standards. Many of you may not even remember we used to fight about that. There's a variation of the fight now, but it was the big companies were saying, we can't get more mileage out of these vehicles. We've got to sell big vehicles, and we've got to have the engines that we now have. We'll do the best we can, but we won't get the mileage the government wants us to get. Along comes Toyota and says, what if we change the engine in the drivetrain? And it blew away the argument. Suddenly the ceiling for where we could go was way up here. Creativity, right? Business acumen applied to environmental problems. And now I see civil society more and more engaged. And I have to give a shout out, and then I will let you get another question, to Deanna Cohen from the Plastic Pollution Coalition. No one has done more, I think, to help us understand the transition from litter to bad molecules. And these molecules work as follows. Where they're turned into industrial goods and products, those are always in communities that can't protect themselves, right? The Cancer Alleys, the Richmonds in California and elsewhere, they tend to be poor, they tend to be communities of color. That's where it starts. Where does it end? The waste, and the whole economy produces waste, that ends up disproportionately in those same places. I mean, you could think of the industrial economy as basically relieving itself constantly in the air we breathe and the water we drink. We can clamp down on that through regulation, we need to, but we can also reinvent new ways of doing it, like Toyota's done, like electric vehicle companies are doing, like people are doing in agriculture now, people are doing in other consumer areas. So that was sort of our trajectory, and it's exciting. I don't think there's ever been as dark as it seems, I don't think there's ever been a better time to be an environmentalist.
Well, because we're educated. We're trying to educate consumers because every day you buy stuff.
Yep.
And your job is to tell us how to read a label and what to buy, and people just want guidance.
Yeah.
They just want guidance. I mean, obviously, there's bills. You've sponsored over 25 bills in California.
Yeah.
And that's all. That's the partner. But one doesn't really work without the other, and one can be a lot faster.
Yeah.
As obviously since 1990 that we didn't pass a Clean Air Act.
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we couldn't pass a major environmental protection law today. If you went to the national environmental groups or any of the big regional groups, or went to us and said, shouldn't we fix our pesticide law? Aren't there things we should fix because the science has raced ahead, or the Safe Drinking Water Act and so forth? The immune system of the regulated communities kicked in so powerfully that that's not an option right now, just being honest. We couldn't establish EPA today. Can you imagine? How about this? Let's set up an agency with about 20,000 regulators and scientists and give them control over vast swaths of the economy. Does that sound like a good idea on Capitol Hill now? No way, right? We couldn't pass the Wilderness Act today. We have to get around that. Elections matter, none more than the one coming up in November, but you can't let yourself be limited much as even as you fight against it, by these major defensive positions that have been built over years with billions of dollars of corporate investments, lobbying. You saw Susan Little talk about hundreds of suits in a room where the two of us go, two from our organization go in and related organizations. You're always outnumbered. But the exciting thing is, which we heard all about today, well, we're just going to go around that. You can't bottle up this cultural impulse to live in a cleaner, healthier world. You can't stop that. You can stop a bill in Congress, but you can't stop that energy. And it's going to go someplace. And right now, it's going to state-level activity. Very exciting stuff happening legislatively in the states. Someone mentioned the Vermont law just recently. Lots of excitement around working with the private sector now. They're no longer just defendants to us. They're now also increasingly partners. And the conversation you had earlier about how you decide to do that, of course it's fraught. It's tricky, right? Developing a certification like yours at Emma, there's all kinds of debates about what the standard should be, who should be awarded the seal, who should not. But the fact that that conversation is happening and we're bringing our environmental values to it and our science, and that's not the last thing I'll say, but I'll try and get by with it. The science has progressed so dramatically in the realm of toxic chemicals and health. We now know that we are decades and decades behind in our laws and regulation what science is telling us we need to do, right? These PFAS chemicals, these microplastics, all of which in human and animal bodies are considered to be neurotoxic, even the little tiniest ones. We have to push ahead, of course, keep pressure on government, but we have to push ahead and push directly at these industries and make them change. I mean, every piece of plastic you see, it ought to have Shell or Chevron or Exxon on it because that's where it comes from.
How do you, I'm just going to just sort of go around here. How do you clearly talk about health with these climate issues and with toxins? Because that's the link, that's the emotional hook. And so I think, you deal with a lot of families, and that's where people get engaged, and that's where they get scared, frankly.
Yeah.
So is that your forward message? Like, what is your message to introduce somebody to care about what your work is?
That's a great question. Well, so for us, the environment is your everyday life. It's not a trip to a wilderness area. It's not even smokestacks on the horizon. It's really the wilderness you encounter at CVS or in your grocery store. And we try and be your guide as you are on that journey. I would much rather try and convince someone who's, maybe at the makeup department at Neiman Marcus, I'd much rather approach them and talk about their day-to-day experience with personal care products than walk in and say, hey, what about polar bears?
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
We try and meet them where they are. They come to our website in droves. We had like 33 million sessions just last year on our website. Most of these people, they're not policy nerds. They're not coming for political advice. They're shopping, and they're concerned about their families, and they've heard something, they've come across us, and they think, well, maybe I can make a change. And once they make that first change, same with companies, right? Again, once you start down the road saying, I want to be sustainable and clean, and I want to live my values, and I'm refining my values all the time and being harder and harder on myself all the time. I mean, it's the Ed Begley syndrome, yeah. Right? I mean, it's in a good way, not the part that scared people on the set, but the part where he doesn't just ride his bike to his job or take mass transit. He also has solar panels. He's looking at what he eats. It turns into a series of habits, and that's driving our movement now, our community now, those individuals. I'm not saying we can shop our way out of this. I'm not a neoliberal fanatic that markets can solve all these problems, but you can't solve these problems without engaging that human behavior and that motivation, that day-to-day
So
life.
because of what you just said, like everything that you know now, what would you have done differently had you known this experience and how people relate to what you're talking about, and even how companies relate to what you're talking about? What would you have done differently 30 years ago when you started it? Because you were hard in on legislation.
Yeah, we were right at the front lines on farm bills and energy bills and all the rest. And I'm proud of that work, and we still do it, and I salute all the organizations that do it. Well, for one thing, it would have been hard to do what I think we should have done without the internet.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that has changed everything. The transparency that's possible, the engagement that's possible. Who knows what will happen in the AI era, where maybe people will stop coming to our website because there will be a clickless search result at the top that tells them what they need to know without coming to EWG.
I
So
do think that somebody is reading our minds, and then it comes on the phone. So maybe you'll be up there in AI land.
but I think one thing I would have done earlier is I would have listened to the voices in the private sector who say, I'm on the same mission, but I happen to be in the private sector. I'm working for a company. Just like when I meet with young folks now and they ask me career advice, first I say, well, soil science. You should you should totally do soil science. And the second thing, if you can't do soil science, I tell them to, look at opportunities in the private sector. Maybe going to business school is going to be more impactful on the environment.
Isn't this amazing,
right?
the shift
Yeah.
of understanding the effectiveness and the lack of effectiveness in certain
Yeah,
process that we have?
totally.
I think we're running over, but I mean, this is again, this is so important, and thank you so much. And I think that everybody just needs to remember, support the companies that you understand are good for the environment and good for health, because that's all we're really looking for. And just educate yourself. Go on the EWG website. The information is there. We've been pitching the good fruit, bad fruit kind of thing in vegetables at Emma since it came out, because it was tangible and we could understand. Still, like my daughter who's sitting right here, she'll say, wait a minute, I bought this. Does it have to be organic, or because it has a thick peel, what does that mean? Like, so these things are ingrained in our different generations. And this is hugely important because, again, it's your health.
Yeah.
It's your family.
And it's everyday life. That's your environment.
Yes.
We talk about it as if it's something intimate that you experience daily. And once you translate it that way, people catch on. And one of the reasons we're able to do it is because, and one of the reasons we gave Debbie a big award this year at our banquet with some of the great leaders in the California legislature, is the storytelling umbrella that you put over all of the environmental community, that this institution that you've created has made you one of the premier change makers, I think, in the environmental movement. So I just want to shout out that it was about time she got an award, so, right?
Thank you so much.